Hi, and welcome to Look Mom, I'm doing Git and AL without the command prompt. Hi, my name is Eric, and this video is Git for beginners. Git and AL for beginners. There's a tendency to make Git way more complicated than it is to begin with, just because Git is an amazing tool and has a ton of very cool features and supports very sophisticated development methodology and setup and teams and you name it. But let's start somewhere else. So normally, as the title implied, Git, every Git tutorial starts by a command line, and you can write Git and something happens, and Git add and do stuff on the command prompt. We're not going to do that. So go away command prompt. Here is Visual Studio Code, and the third icon, the Git logo in reality up here, even though Visual Studio Code do support other source code management systems besides Git. It's Git all the way. And what I'm going to do to begin with is actually go down to the extension icon down here. And I'm going to find an extension called Git Lens. So I do 98% of everything I need to do with Git right here in Visual Studio Code without even touching the command line. And a huge part of that is because I use Git Lens. So I'll install that one just to have it here. This is installed. That was quick because I just uninstalled it just before I started the video. So the illusion is that I just installed it. Anyway, so let's see. We have nothing here, so let's create an extension. AL project 5. How about that? And we'll do a 6.0. And I will connect to I have my usual Docker called BC, but a server instance called BC. I can go and download my symbols. All is good in the world of this extension. So now we can see that I got an extension here. That's nice. I have some symbols. I have a launch JSON. I have an app JSON, and I have a hello world. So what is Git? Well, Git is a database that keeps track of the changes to your application. And if we go over here again, we can see that the folder currently open does not have a Git repository. You can initialize the repository, which will enable source control features powered by Git. Perfect. And notice that then there's something more to learn, blah, blah, blah. You can also directly publish this folder to a GitHub repository. But be very clear that Git does not equal GitHub. So as soon as I hit initialize repo here, you see I get the number 7, meaning that right now there are 7 changes made to my my project here, my extension, that are not in Git yet. But that means that now I have a Git database in this extension. So let me show you. If I go here and then I say reveal in File Explorer, and I go into AL Project 5, and let me see if I can do this meaningful. I will try to zoom again, and if we're lucky, you can see that in here there is a .git folder. So the .git folder is where the database is. Let's see if I can get out of this thing meaningful again. So I go into the .git folder, and you can see that here there's stuff here: head, description, config, ref, objects, info, hooks. There's stuff in here. Let's see if I'm able to get rid of this magnifier. I'm playing around with what magnifiers to use. I'm not sure I want to use the built-in. Anyway, so the Git database is now sitting on my server here, on my PC. In the Git database is just files in a folder, and the folder is called .git. So what GitHub and GitLab and Azure DevOps and stuff like that will do is that they will host a Git repository. This database is also called a repository. They will host it for you, but you always need to have it yourself here. Then you can have the same database replicated at GitHub or at Azure DevOps or somewhere else. But we have the database now sitting on the machine here in that folder. And we can see that we got the number 7 here, saying that we have 7 files that needs tracking, 7 changes that needs tracking. So I will commit them into the database. So these, you can hear that the words are kind of the same as what we use with SQL and normal databases. So I'm committing these changes into the database. I'll just call them init because that's a very, very good first name for the very first commit. I hit the check mark. We can see we got a clock, and now the number 7 has disappeared. That means that what's now in the database and what we have in our working folder here is the exact same thing. No difference between what's in Git and what's on our disk in the folders. So if I now go to Hello World here, and I change the, no, actually let's do something else to begin with. I'll go to my app.json and I will rename the project. So instead of the very, very good name AL Project 5, I'll call it Git for Beginners here. And also, you know what, I will change the object range to be something else. We need 3,000 objects for this extension. So okay, so you see now I have changed this one. There's nothing over here because this is still unsaved. So the minute I save it, keep an eye on it's over there. Keep an eye on the icon on the left. I press Control S, and I got the number 1, meaning that now there's one file that's different from what's in Git on disk. So if I click on this now, I can see that, okay, it tells me that app.json has changed. So now I got some options. I can go look at the file. I can undo the changes, meaning that if I go, I'm not going to do it actually, no, we'll do that a bit later, but I can revert back to how the file looked in Git, how the file looks currently in Git. I can click on it, and we can now see that, and let me get, we can now see the changes. So we have on the left side how the file looks in Git, and on the right side my changes. So we can see that I have changed the name and I have changed the object range. So let's commit that. So let's call this one update app.json new name plus object range. And I commit that to the database. You see that now this one changed. So we are comparing the head of what's in Git with what we have on disk. So now there's no changes, no difference, because we just committed this to Git. So that's pretty awesome. If we now go and look at a file here, we can look at hello world. And now we actually got an error because we changed the object range. So perhaps let's go and give that a new object number. There we go. I'll save that. We got an error, so renumbering of all objects. I commit that. So if I now go to the file here, hello world, I can open the timeline and we can see that there are 2 commits. We have made 3 commits, right? But there's 2 of them is touching this file. The initial one is touching this, meaning that everything is new at that point. And we have the renumbering, which is the difference between the init version and the newest version, where we renamed the number, renumbered the object, renamed the number. Wow. It's late night here in British Columbia, and it's pitch black dark outside, so bear with me. One of the things that Git lens gives us, so if I go here, that if you don't have Git lens installed, there's nothing really down here. But if I close this one and open here, we can see, suddenly we can see the history of all my commits. So we can see what was in this one, what was in this one, what was in the original. So I have my entire history here. And now let's do one more thing. So now we'll build. I build, and we can see that I get 2 changes. So there are now 2 changed files. So let's close commits and open source control, and we can see that, well, one of them is our app, and the other one is the strange rat.json that is very internal for Visual Studio Code to figure out how much it needs to send to the server and recompile and stuff like that. So there's no reason to track that file. So we would love to have Git just ignore that file. And the way to do that is actually to add a new file to our project. So let's close this one and then go and say we want a new file. And this new file has a strange name. This is .git ignore. And what you put in here, so let's keep track of this. So right now it's saying that we have 3 files that changed compared to what we have in Git, because git ignore is also a file. But if we in here add this one and save, you saw that the rat.json is now on track, so it will ignore that one on disk, because there's no reason for us to have that in the repository. And when it comes to what you put in git ignore, there's tons of schools, tons of preachers, tons of ways to do this. Some will not have the launch JSON in there because they believe that launch JSON is selective to where you are and not necessary the project, the extension itself. Others ignores the symbols. Others do not want the app files in here. I'm a very inclusive guy, so I mainly track everything but stupid things like rat.json and other truly temporary files. Reason for that is I have seen a lot of, with, like, for instance, tracking the symbols has turned out to be actually important because there's been a tendency to do symbols creeping, meaning that you in your app.json says, okay, I'm going to target this as 15. My app should be able to run on 15. It's a noble intent if you want to support something that's not the newest version. But if you then still connect to a newer than 15 and you have symbols that are newer than 15, then you inadvertently might just reference a field that only exists in a later version, or use a function in a code unit that was not present in 15. So keeping the symbols in sync with what you have in your app.json kind of requires you to make sure that you actually track the symbols with the source. So in certain ways, the symbols are also the source here. Let me undo this. So that's the reason I keep all the symbols in Git also. I also keep the outputted app file because every time you build, so here's the thing, that every time I compile and build a new app file, it gets a new build ID. Package ID, I think is the right name, that sits in the header of the app file. If you want a video on app files pulled apart and looking at all the bits, let me know in the comments below. I don't think that would be very popular, but maybe consider subscribing. So if you have, even though you have the same version of the app, so every time I compile here, sorry, not B, I'll get a new app file, and it's different from the one I just had. So if I'm in a PTE situation where I'm uploading this app file to multiple cloud tenants, Business Central and Cloud will complain and say, you can't, it's already there and it's different and stuff like that, and then you need to increment the version number, and then it's just cumbersome. But if you compile once and keep that specific app file, then you can just upload it everywhere and it will still work. So from that aspect, I keep whenever I have a official build, I'm committing that to Git also, so I always have the app file. There's a lot of different ways of doing that. You can store artifacts on a build server and stuff like that, but you can also just do that in Git if you need to. So as I'm saying, I'm very inclusive, so I only exclude stuff that has no purpose at all, like the rat.json file. So let's build app here. So now we're committing that, and now it just works. So let's say that, okay, I'm changing the message, so hello Git world here, and I'm saving this. So this is saved on disk. And then at some point I figured that was actually not what I wanted to do. So I can now go back here and find my change and says, please discard my changes. And what does that mean? That means that I will discard what I've done and replace it with what's in Git right now. Meaning we're back to this one, no changes. So now comes on to when to commit. And there's, again, lots of different schools. I tend to commit whenever something makes sense. So I'd rather commit too often than too seldom, if that's even a word. So whenever something is meaningful, so I'll do hello Git world here, and this is a great change. So 100% better app now. I'll commit that, and it's committed because it makes sense. So right now I have basically only changed one file at a time on each commit, but a commit could certainly be, let's put in 100% here, and then go and change the name to Git for Beginners 100%. So now we have two files, the 100% change, because that makes sense of those two files. So we can go back and look at my commits, and I can see that now I have already committed 6 times. And I can see what's in each commit. So all this take place in the default named. You can see down here in the corner, it says master. Might not be appropriate naming of branches anymore. You can rename them, but I think that's for another one. Right now, this is still the default name, but it's known as a branch. And you can think of a branch as a version. So let's say that master in this case is where I do all my development work. I've seen a lot of people who matches branches with sandboxes. Like if you have a dev sandbox, a UAT sandbox, and then a production, then you'll have 3 branches in your Git also. So this one would be connected to my dev sandbox. So if I go down and I look at here at branches, I can see I only have the master branch right now. So I can right click on this one and say, okay, let me create a branch. And I will call this for UAT, because that would match my workflow in this case. So I create that, and I will create it from master. So now it's kind of linked that master at this point will become, there will be a branch that is taken out of master at this point in the life of master. I'll create that one, and you can see that Git lens fire off some commands on my command line, but I don't care because I just right click on it. And now we can see that I have 2 branches here. If I open master and I click on compare, then let's compare with UAT. We can see that, let's close this one so you can see, we can see that UAT is 0 commits behind and 0 commits ahead. So let's say that we continue to work here. So now we're upping this, so now this is the 200% version. Oops, sorry. I'll go back in source control, and now this is 200% version. I'll commit that. So that is committed into master. So now we can do the same thing again. We have already, let's actually make this a bit wider so we can see what happens. Compare master with UAT, and I'll refresh this. And now we can see that, let's close this one. We can see that master is ahead of UAT. So see, this is at 200%. So if I now go down here and say, okay, let's switch over and look at UAT instead. So we can only switch branch when we have nothing that is unmodified, because now it's replacing files on the disk for us. So I click on UAT, and if you keep an eye on the text up here, you can see now we're in UAT and we're back to the 100% version. In general, switching branches and the AL compiler hates, no, well, the AL compiler cannot figure out what happens when you're switching branches. So I always go in and then I say reload window, because otherwise the compiler is totally confused sometimes. It has no clue that suddenly you change tons of files, and it really thinks that everything is wrong, but it's not. So now I am in UAT, and I know I'm behind now. So if I go here on UAT, we can compare UAT with master. So now we're doing comparing the other run. So now we can see that we're behind. Before we looked at master compared with UAT where we are ahead, but looking from UAT's perspective, we are now behind. So what I can do here now is that I can let's do this. So now I right click on the branch I'm not in. So I'm currently sitting in UAT. So I right click on I right click, well, there we go. And I can merge my master branch into my current branch, and current is UAT. We'll merge one commit from branch master into branch UAT. Yes, please. And if you saw up here, now UAT has the 200%. So if we now go and look at, we can look at the hello world and look at the timeline for that one. We can see that the 200% change has now been merged into UAT. We can also, there's other features, and now I need to make sure that I'm not getting into the too advanced stuff. But you can cherry pick and say, I want this commit to be moved into UAT. So you can cherry pick what you actually want. The next logical progression here would be to go back and look at this and see, okay, now we have a UAT branch. So let's create a branch again, and let's call this one for production. And we will create a new branch called production from UAT. So right now, this will be the same. So if we go in and look at production and compare production with UAT, we can see that it's the same. It's neither ahead or front, they are the same. And as we just merge from master to UAT, now we can, let's say that something happens in master, we get our dev stuff and we'll put that to UAT. And maybe I should mention what UAT means in case you don't know that. That's a user acceptance test. So that's what we call the sandbox, typically, where the client, the users can test their stuff. Called UAT. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that at the beginning. But if we go back here, we go back to master, and I do the reload because I do the reload, and now we're up to the 300% version, because this is serious, right? So we have one change. Sorry, we have one change here. The 300% version. This is gold. Exclamation point. So now if we want to, we can also compare master with we can compare master with production if we want to. So we can jump a link if we want to. We can still see that master is one commit ahead. This is the 300% version. So I can now go to UAT. I reload just because I do. And I right click on master and says I want to merge my master into UAT. So now this is the 300% change that's going from dev to UAT. So now we can do and say, okay, let's compare our UAT. So the client asks what's in UAT that has not been put into production yet. Let's clear this one and then say, okay, we want to compare UAT with production. We can see, UAT is one commit ahead of production. So right now, dear client, the 300% change is now in UAT, is not yet in production. So suddenly we have a clear list of what's where, because the branches take this. So at some point we would switch to production. I'll just reload because you know by now that I do that. Come on, Visual Studio Code, you can do this. And I can take UAT and say, okay, merge branch into current branch. So we'll merge one commit from branch UAT into branch production. That's exactly what we want. And we look here, and now we have up there the 300% change in production. And I'm at a half an hour, so I think this is probably a good place to stop. So that's a non-command line way of actually using Git and using just a fraction of the functionality that's in Git. There's lots of great classes and website and instructions where you can sharpen your Git skills. But I think getting what I've shown you to work and use that in your daily work will take you a long way. And it's really neat to, you know, when did we change something, how did we change it, and what's the I love the compare function saying also what's the difference between production and dev, and being able to answer those questions very easy. And it all begins with having great descriptions on your commits. Trust me, having precise description with commits is the ticket. And no pun intended, but if you have a ticket system, a task management system, project system, and so on, actually reference the task numbers in commits, saying that if you had a specific task number 17 was to create a certain report, well, make that report a commit. If there's two fields added to a table that the report needed, then make the table extension and report in the same commit, and tag it with the task system, so you and your colleagues can see this is it. This is what sitting right now in UAT and yet to be moved to production, and really helps communication on so many levels. That's it. Let me know if you want more Git build server set up. We haven't really, so we have just worked locally in this Git. We have not replicated anywhere, so maybe there's room for a video number 2. Let me know in the comments below if you would like that. Until next time, have a wonderful day.